Hello? Are we live? I don't even know. Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Welcome to another episode of Fixer Upper FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions. Today we're going to talk about a couple things that are important. Just not going to keep you too long, keep it short and sweet. First, I want to make sure that this is actually on. It says it is. Today, I want to talk about a simple principle. Hey, Mayor.
Yeah.
Am I on the live? Oh, never mind. I got two followers. Give me a thumbs up if you're watching.
I just
Okay, cool. All right, so today's workout topic is how do I know if I'm working out hard enough? And this is coming from a place, actually Gwyneth asked a question during one of her workouts last week, and she said, check your heart rate, and she said, that'd be a good FAQ, how to check your heart rate. And so from that, we got the question, how to know if I'm working out hard enough. And so what we want to do is break down 4 different ways. There's Meredith. 4 different ways that you can learn how to know if you're working out hard enough. And so the reason this is important is because you see some folks in the gym and man, they're just the sweat's pouring off them and or they're grunting or they're throwing weights around or something like that. And you're like, man, they're really working hard. Why aren't I sweating like they're sweating? Or you may see someone and say, man, they're making that exercise look really easy. How do they make that look so easy? And those are probably the 2 extremes. One guy's probably working too hard, and one guy's probably not working hard enough. But the things we want to overview today are why it's important to gauge your workout intensity, and how we're going to do that is by looking at 4 different methods. And so real quickly before we start, those methods are how to manage your heart rate, why that's important, your breathing rate, your rating of perceived exertion or your RPE, or the 4th one is your muscle fatigue. So, but first let's talk about why it's important to gauge your workout intensity and why do we focus on this thing? You'll hear trainers all the time will say, let me check your heart rate, or a good trainer will check your heart rate after a hard bout of exercise. And they want to know, why are they checking your heart rate? What is that telling you? I don't understand. Is it good? Is it bad? Should I have a high heart rate? Should I have a low heart rate? Let's just go over some basics to get started. When you're setting your workout, remember your goals that you made when you started the workout. We talked about this very early on in the FAQ, and that was how to set SMART goals or attainable goals. I recommend you watch that if you're not familiar with that, but talks about setting goals that you can actually achieve, and we call that SMART goals. And so usually what those goals break down to are one of 3 types of exercise, either endurance, strength training, or power, or some combination therein of those 3. And so this is when you want to start bringing in this tool of your intensity, and you want to align your intensity to meet your goal. And so if you remember, we talked about the FIT principle a while back as well. Frequency, intensity, time, and type. The intensity are where we start to track these different dynamics of your workout, and they usually align to whatever your goal may be. And so if your goal is endurance, you want to have a certain heart rate. If your goal is strength, if your goal is power, they all kind of align themselves with a different intensity. And so let's talk about what that means. And I'll probably throughout this try to keep things fairly broad. If you have more specific questions, I would love it if you would comment or ask a question, and I'd be happy to answer that. But let's just keep it broad for now. And we all know going into this that there's certain intensities of workout that align with certain goals. And so and for an example, if you're not following, like if you want to lose weight, you pick an aerobic or an endurance style of exercise, there's a certain heart rate range that you want to use for that to achieve that goal. or there's a certain breathing rate, or there's certain techniques you can use to help that workout go better. But that's why it's important to know before you check to see how hard you're working, or if you're working out hard enough, you want to make sure your workout intensity aligns with your goal. Okay. So going forward from that, let's talk about the different tactics or techniques you can use to make sure you're working out hard enough, or the correct intensity level to meet your goal. So the first one we use, and this is the most common that we use, is heart rate. A lot of times you think about your heart rate. Obviously, that's how fast your heart, usually we're talking about how many beats per minute that your heart will beat. And so most people have a resting heart rate. It means if they're sitting down, their resting heart rate is between 50 and 60, 50 and 70, somewhere in there. That's fine. Anything below 100 is really considered normal. Depending on what activity you're doing, your body will go up and down depending on what you're doing throughout the day, between 60 and 100. Once you get start working, your heart rate goes up. But your heart rate goes up because your body needs more oxygen, and more oxygen means more blood flow. And that's why your heart starts to kick in a little bit. But let's talk about the ranges of heart rate when you're in exercise. And so when you're in a recovery or a warm up, we talk about 50% of your max. Well, let's pump the brakes right now. What is your max heart rate? There's a few different ways you can figure out what your max heart rate is. The one that most people use is the number 220 minus your age. So I am 31. And so my max heart rate is 189 beats per minute. That's just a guess. I tend to get up at least once a week. I get up close to the max heart rate. Sometimes I go over top. It doesn't mean you're going to die if you go over your predicted max heart rate. There's some folks that can work out pretty, for a fairly long time close to their max heart rate. And some folks that we kind of peter out pretty quickly. It all depends on your training. But that's how we find out the maxed heart rate. And then next, we take a percentage of that. And there's a couple of different ways, again, to do the percentage max of the heart rate. We're not going to get too complicated. The easiest way is just to take a percentage of that max heart rate. And so 50% of that max heart rate would be a recovery or warm up. So 190 beats, give or take. I'll make myself 30 to make this easy. 190 beats would be 95, right? 95 beats a minute. Is that right? I think so. Yeah, 95. And if I'm 95 and 100, I'm in a warm-up stage. Aerobic or weight loss would be 60% of the max. 70% is aerobic cardio. Anaerobic, you're getting up to 80, 85%. And then max would be 90 to 100% of your heart rate. So those are just rough estimates of your workload. So if we go through these, you'll see if my goal is weight loss, I want to stay between 50 and 70% of my max heart rate, which is which would be when your body's utilizing oxygen at its maximum. That's why we call it aerobic. And that means you're usually burning stored weight or stored energy, rather, which is usually fat. And that has a much more efficient calorie burn, you should say. So without getting too into it, it's like using your high octane fuel. It burns a lot. So when you burn, a gram of fat, it's 9 calories versus a carbohydrate, it's 4 calories. And so you just get more bang for your buck for that system. But you also are able to stay there longer, giving a more calorie burn. So that's one way you can use heart rate. The other way you can use heart rate is called the heart rate reserve method. And all that does is subtract your resting heart rate in the beginning and then adds it back towards the end. It's slightly more accurate. A trainer can do that for you without question. Now you're asking, well, that's all good information. How do I track my heart rate when I'm working out? You can do it a couple different ways. You can wear a watch. I like to wear my Garmin watch. My wife has a Fitbit. They track heart rate fairly accurately. I think the iWatches, they do it as well, but they take some sort of average over time, which is not always as accurate. But you can track it that way. If you don't have an activity tracker, you can use a stopwatch. You can palpate a couple of different places at your wrist or at your neck. And you can learn how to do that, or someone can show you how to do that. And you track usually 15 seconds and you multiply by 4. And then you can say, hey, once you know your range, and you say, if you take your heart rate on your wrist and it says 45 after, 4 times that by 4, you're at 180 beats. You can say, hey, well, I know I'm working pretty vigorously. That's not what my goal is. I need to slow it down some. And that's how you can kind of align your workout intensity using your heart rate. And so the last thing I'm going to talk about is, what should your heart rate do when you work out? If you go through a workout and you say, man, my heart rate really never even goes up, or I feel like my heart rate goes up and down and it flutters back and forth, or it goes up and never comes back down. Those are all things you want to say. Is it supposed to do that? So I'm gonna kind of let you know what it's supposed to do, and then you can kind of use that to make sure your heart's doing the right thing. These can kind of show certain problems down the road. Say your heart rate's not doing what it's supposed to do. Those are sort of warning signs or red flags. You can say, that didn't feel right. That didn't seem right. Let me go get that checked out. So without further, when you first start working out, your heart rate's going to go up. We talked about that before. You're telling your body that you need more oxygen to do work. Your muscles need oxygen to contract. Your heart rate will go up to provide that oxygen to it. Now, eventually, when you continue to work out at a certain intensity, it's going to level off. We call that a steady state. You'll stay there for as long as your workout intensity stays sort of constant. Eventually, you're going to get to a spot where it's called threshold, where you cannot hold that same that same steady state, and your heart rate will start to rise. And you're like, I didn't do anything. I'm running the same pace. I'm working. Your body's just starting to fatigue. Muscles are getting fatigued. It's getting harder to get that oxygen in and the CO2 out. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then the last one would be when you reach that threshold, your heart rate's going to spike usually and keep going up until you stop. After you stop, your heart rate will go back down, usually below your normal resting, before creeping back up. Your body's pretty awesome. If you were to watch your heart rate go up during a run or a jog, you would see, let me see if I can find myself. So you would see your heart rate would go up past where it has to go. Then it's going to steady state and stay online. And then once you get to a threshold, it's going to start to go up again until you stop. Once you stop, it's going to drop right back down below where it even started before it rises back up. It's kind of unique. Your body will adjust your heart rate as necessary. So that was heart rate. If you get anything from that, you can say use your heart rate to gauge how hard you're working. Remember those percentages. 50% of your max is resting or warm up or cool down. 60 to 70% is going to be your aerobic, or you're burning calories. You can do that for a much longer period of time. You're working out the endurance type muscle. Anaerobic is 80%. That means you're working out very fast, lots of power, lots of strength, short burst. You can't do it for very long. It takes a little bit longer to recover. And then max would be, once again, really powerful, short burst. You can't do it for very long. You're working out power, type 2 type muscle fiber there. Secondly is your breathing rate. This ties right into the heart rate. So the quicker your breathing rate, or the more rapid your breathing rate, usually the harder you're working. So why does your breathing rate matter? Your breathing will go up because your oxygen increase is going up. Your muscles contract. They produce products like CO2 that need to get out of the muscle. And so your blood will drop off oxygen, pick up CO2, and that's what you breathe out. The more you're doing that, the more those muscles are contracting, the more you're producing these byproducts, and they need to get out. Remember, a second ago, we talked about the threshold when that level of CO2, it's actually a hydrogen ion, but many of you've heard it before as lactic acid. That's not quite the same thing, but it kind of goes with that threshold. When that number gets too high, your body loses its ability to get that out of the muscle. That's when you've reached that threshold. So breathing rate is important as you go up. If your breathing rate is too rapid or too deep or too shallow, you're going to find your workouts are going to suffer for it. So it's important to practice good breathing. That's usually deep breaths, not so much deep breaths, but not shallow, not too deep. You should breathe steady. You should breathe constantly. not too shallow, and not too deep. Those are the things you want to focus on. You'll hear some folks say, breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and exhale on exertion and all that. In through your nose and out through your mouth is really when you're short of breath, when you're maybe having an asthma attack, or maybe you're battling COPD or some pulmonary issue. You want to talk about pursed lip breathing and deep breaths, getting the air down deep into your lungs. But really, when you're working out or going for a run or working in the gym, just work on breathing constantly and steady. That's the most important thing. Don't worry about when the air is coming in and out as much, and just make sure the air is coming in and out. A lot of times you'll see breathing is associated with power. So if you're doing a power move like a hang clean or snatch, you'll want a big, strong exhale as you move through that power move. That is more important, but those are also more technical moves. The third way, and this is something I've touched on during my live workouts, is the rating of perceived exertion, or the RPE. This one is relative to you. And so RPE is the rating of perceived exertion. How you determine that, there's a scale. It's either 1 to 10 or 6 to 20, two different scales. The easiest one is to say 1 to 10, and this is how hard you're working out. And you want to say 1 would be, I always liken that to lying down on the couch, and 10 would be the hardest thing you've ever done or can imagine doing. A lot of times the example I use is you're down in the middle of a rock quarry with a huge sledgehammer, and you're hammering away at rocks all day long, and it's like 115 degrees outside. That's just hard work. Or some people say you're dragging something really hard, you're pushing, pulling. Just maximal exertion would be what a 10 RPE would be. And so this one is relative. And so for me, something that's a 6 may be a 4 for you, or vice versa. This is one where you got to really be honest with yourself. It is really important. There's lots of research and study coming out about RPE workouts where you don't track reps and you don't track time. You say, hey, I want you to work, get to a point where you're working at a 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, and then stay there as long as you can. Or monitoring strength gains, when you say, hey, if you're working for strength or power, when you did your set of 5, actually thinking back and saying, well, I did 5 reps is supposed to be strength, right? We talked about that before. So like 3 to 5 reps would be for strength, and then 6 to 8 would be for hypertrophy. Well, if I do 8 curls with 2.5 pounders on my biceps, is that hypertrophy? It's a good question, right? According to the RPE, or according to the science books, 8 to 10 reps, that's hypertrophy, man. Biceps are gonna explode with my 2.5 pound dumbbell curl. But the missing part there, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because usually granny or my 3-year-old can do a deadlift with a 12-pound kettlebell. So does that mean that it's not working? So the missing part there is the RPE. If it's not hitting that RPE at a 7 or 8 out of 10, then you're just not getting it. So make sure that RPE aligns with your goal, and you're not just doing the reps part of that. And that's why RPE is super important. The last one is muscle fatigue. I'm going to just touch on 3 things here that we've all heard in the gym. One is like feel the burn, and then the other one is no pain, no gain. And the last thing we'll talk about muscle soreness after. You always hear about DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. What does all that mean? How does that help me know if I'm working out too hard? First of all, feel the burn. There's some validity to that. If when you're working out reps and sets of exercise, you do want to feel some muscle burn. That means you are working the muscle out almost to its fatigue point, and that's when you reach that overload point. That's often a good point, a good feeling. If you feel like once again, we're doing bicep curls. I start doing bicep curls, and my biceps start to feel that burn. I've reached overload. If I do 2 or 3 reps in that burn, then I can probably say, hey, I've reached that workload that I was after. Usually that means you're up into a 7 or 8 in your RPE as well. All these things kind of tie together. No pain, no gain. This is one we try to stay away from at Fixer Upper, particularly because it's misused quite frequently. The pain, because a lot of folks don't realize the pain associated with Working out is not the same pain that the original statement was made. So the pain it's talking about is actually the last point here. That's the soreness, or about the first point there about feeling the burn. You don't want to work out so hard that you're actually feeling physical pain. We want to talk about light soreness after a workout, or a little bit of burning during an exercise, not like sharp, shooting, dull, aching, stabbing pain. That's not what we're after when we're working in the gym. So I would say if you see someone and they're like, no pain, no gain, they're probably working out a little bit too intense and they're setting themselves up for an injury. And the last one I'm going to talk about today is muscle soreness post-workout. You may get to a point where you're doing your workouts and you say, man, I am never sore after I do a workout, whether it's running, my legs are never sore, or maybe you did a heavy leg day or bench day. You say, man, I'm not sore. I could do the same thing today. That's when you want to look at it and say, hey, I could probably work out harder. I'm not saying there always should be soreness, but there should be some muscle fatigue. And if you reach that overload principle that we're talking about, where your body is working hard, chances are you'll at least have a diminished strength the next day. Not so much soreness, but you'll be able to like stretch and say, yeah, I did something. The other side of that is when you work out and you say, man, I can't even like sit down without my legs hurting, or I can't take my arms over my head because my chest is so sore after doing a workout, or you can't get out of bed the next day because you ran longer than you should have. That's the other side of that. And that means you're working out too hard. You should have some soreness or fatigue the next day. It should wane the second day and be gone by the third day. You'll often see workouts split to make room for that soreness. So just a quick recap here. How do I know if I'm working out hard enough? You want to make sure your workout's intensity align with your goals. Check your heart rate, make sure it's in the right range. Check your breathing rate, make sure you're breathing steady and constantly. If you're never short of breath during a workout, you probably need to work out harder. If you're doing bicep curls and you come up and you're panting, you probably held your breath and you probably need to breathe more. Your rating of perceived exertion, your RPE, make sure you don't go through a whole gym session at like a 1 or a 2 or a 3. That would essentially be a waste of your time. Your benefits would be minimal. Make sure you're going to get some workout out of that, staying in a 5, 6, or 7, unless you're doing power workouts or sprints, and then you can be in a 9 or 10. And lastly, muscle fatigue. Feel the burn a little bit. No pain, no gain. Get that out of your head. You don't need to use that one. And muscle soreness after is okay as long as it doesn't linger too long, like I did on this FAQ. So if you have any questions about this, if you're watching it after it was live, please send them to our Facebook, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. This has been FAQ. How do I know if I'm working out hard enough, or how do I know if I'm working out too hard? We look forward to seeing you. There should be a workout tomorrow with Lydia, a yoga on Sunday with Gwyneth, and some exciting things coming as Fix Your Upper prepares to open. If you haven't signed up for our our virtual run or 1 mile walk, please do so. All benefits go to Halo and all the great things that they're doing. We'll see you next time.